Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to How to Have Difficult Conversations and Drive Your Career Forward. Today, I am going to share with you why having conversations about your career is difficult for smart, accomplished women, and how you can address that, how you can neutralize the difficult, and specific action steps that you can take starting today, that action steps that you can implement right away to start being in the driver's seat of your career. And I'm also going to talk to you about working with me as your one-on-one coach. If you like this content, I'll make you an offer to have that conversation. Before we get there, I know we have some people kind of trickling in right now. Let me tell you a little bit about me, why that's important to you, why that matters to you before we start the presentation. Okay, my name is Jamie Lee. I'm a certified coach. I work as a negotiation and leadership coach for smart women who hate office politics, and I help them get promoted and better paid without throwing anyone under the bus. I am an immigrant. I came to the United States 30 years ago. I was 8 years old, so you can do the math. You know exactly how old I am. And I came to America as a little kid. My mom ended up raising the three of us. I'm one of three daughters, and she basically got divorced in America, and she raised the three of us by herself. Even to this day, she speaks English a little bit worse than Margaret Cho's mom. Now, if you are around my age, you might know who comedian Margaret Cho is. If not, maybe you've heard of Awkwafina. She was in Crazy Rich Asians. So Margaret Cho was the predecessor. She was Awkwafina before there was Awkwafina in the world. And yeah, so the point being, my mom, she speaks English kind of badly. She still has a really thick accent. Nonetheless, she raised the three of us by herself, ran a business. She ran a nail salon for many years. She put all three of us through college. We are all, contributing members of society. And all this time, when I was growing up in America as an immigrant latchkey kid, she was telling me, Jamie, you gotta speak up. You gotta be brave. You gotta ask for what you want. Because I was the person who was put in charge of translating on behalf of my mother, translating from Korean to English, right? Translating with the utilities company and negotiating a better deal, or translating the school documents, right? And she was always telling me, you gotta speak up. You gotta speak up for me. You gotta speak up for you. And as I was growing up, I did not appreciate this lesson. I was like, I just want to be well liked. I just want to be the nice, quiet girl that everyone likes, And I don't want to speak up. I don't want to ask for things. And it wasn't until I got into the working world, fast forward many years, I got into the working world. I worked as a hedge fund analyst 10 years ago. And one day I found out I was making 50% of the going market range. And I realized my problem was I didn't know how to have difficult conversations. I didn't know how to be in the driver's seat of my career because I was just letting these things happen to me instead of engaging in conversations about what I wanted, engaging in conversations about what I could do, right? Engaging in conversations about how to problem solve with people to signal my leadership and to drive my career forward. And another thing I want to share with you about my immigrant experience is that when I was very young, I watched my parents, before they split up, I watched my parents work themselves to the bone. Like, really. They worked 364 days out of the year running this little gift shop in Queens. And they did this for like 6-7 years when I was in elementary school. And I really missed them. I really wanted them home. It was traumatizing for me as a young kid, new immigrant kid in America, to not have my parents around. And they taught me the lesson of work ethic. They taught me the lesson of being dedicated, committed, and doing whatever it takes to put food on the table, right? To uphold the American dream. I mean, I'm doing the work I am doing now because of their sacrifices, because my mom taught me, you got to speak up, be brave, and ask for what you want. I've sort of become my mother because as a negotiation and leadership coach, this is the lesson I pass on to my women clients, right? But also from my experience of watching my parents work so hard. You know, they got divorced. My father got kidney disease. I mean, he recently passed away, which is very sad. But ultimately, the lesson they taught me through their example is that I don't have to work myself to the bone. I don't have to kill myself to put food on the table. I don't have to work 7 days a week. And this is a really powerful lesson for me. This is the lesson that I want to pass on to my clients, to you as well, that if you learn to have difficult conversations, if you learn to drive your career forward, as you will today, there is no need to work 6-7 days a week. There's no need to overwork. There's no need to sacrifice the time you'll have with your family, with your loved ones. Yeah, we can do it better. We can ask for what we want. We can engage in conversations, and you can do it better so that you can have an integrated life of both a fulfilling life at work and a fulfilling personal life at home. Okay. Having said that, since I became a coach, I have traveled all over the world. I've traveled to Rwanda last year. I traveled to Canada. I've traveled to Japan, and I gave these workshops. And I've trained many women on how to engage in these conversations. And today I'm going to share with you some of the best, most simple, but powerful and effective tools that you can implement right away, right after this, webinar, to see different results from these conversations. Okay, so let's move forward. So the thing that I have learned from teaching negotiation and leadership skills to thousands of women around the world is that thousands of women around the world have a tendency to discount themselves, okay? And this habit of discounting ourselves, it feels like second nature. It's just like, it just happens like automatically because, let me give you an example. Let's say you go to work and somebody compliments you on your outfit. What is your first response? What is the first thing that comes out of your mouth? Do you say, oh, this whole thing? Or do you say, oh, I got this on discount? Or do you say something like, oh, this is nothing, right? We even discount praise on our outfits. We even discount the recognition that we get because in our minds, we're thinking we still have to prove ourselves. And that's just the symptom of how we discount ourselves in our own heads, right? We think, oh, I'm not yet accomplished. I need to prove myself. I need to do X, Y, and Z. When I get to that promotion, then I can celebrate. Then I can feel accomplished, right? And that is just a subtle but persistent way that we discount our current success. We discount our current level of accomplishment. And recently I wrote a post about this, but our inability to own our current level of success, our current wins, no matter where you are in your career, right? Wherever you are, you have made progress. Your inability to fully own and celebrate that is directly correlated to your inability to speak up and advocate for yourself. Because if you can't own it fully without discounting it, then how could you advocate for it? Right? You don't advocate for what you don't fully own. But when we come from this mindset, it just feels so natural because we've been kind of taught to think and behave that way because we think that, oh, that's just being polite. That's just being like, socially acceptable. Then of course we overwork and overcommit because somehow when we're constantly discounting ourselves, we don't fully we don't fully acknowledge that our plates are full. We don't fully acknowledge that we have done enough, that we are ready for that promotion conversation. We're ready to engage. And when women start thinking about asking for what they want, then they often make the mistake of equating what they want with selfishness. If I were to ask for more me time at home, that's me being selfish. If I were to, share my feedback with the CEO on, how I think this company can be improved, right? Which is what I want. I want to see improvements. I want to see more progress, better results. Somehow that's going to be an attack on the people who've been doing it the way it's done, right? We mistake saying what we want with selfishness and attack. And so, of course, when we do that, we don't engage in difficult conversations because we're entertaining the worst of what ifs. Worst of like what can go wrong if I were to engage in that conversation. Now, having said this, I know that it is real. Bias is real. Sexism is real. Bad things do happen. Sometimes you prepare yourself up to the gill. You do your best of preparing yourself for a conversation. And even then you have a reaction or a response that was your worst outcome. These things do happen. However, it doesn't serve you to be constantly worrying and entertaining the worst possible scenario without also considering what can go right. Right? If we're going to entertain the worst possible scenario, we also have to entertain the best possible scenario because we don't know what's going to happen. If you're afraid somebody's going to get mad, your boss is going to get upset with you for wanting to change teams, you also have to consider what can go right. What is the benefit? What is the best possible outcome? Maybe your boss is like, you know what, actually, I support you in that decision. Here's my blessing. And in fact, here are the people that you should talk to about making the best possible smooth transition. We don't know. So we have to entertain both worst and the best possible scenario. But when we don't, we take too long to ask. We take too long to speak up. We take too long to engage in conversations that's going to drive our careers forward. And then we are surprised. And then we're taken aback when we see Jim in accounts get promoted, even though you think Jim's work is kind of sloppy. And then we're taken aback when you see somebody else who you feel is less qualified than you climb the ladder, because we've just waited too long, right? And so these are common mistakes that thousands of women around the world make. And it helps to understand why. Why are we taking too long to ask? Why are we entertaining the worst of what ifs? Why are we mistaking what we want with selfishness with attack? Why are we overworking and discounting ourselves at the expense of our career satisfaction and growth? The reason is very simple. Think of your brain. Your brain is the organ, the major organ with which you operate in the world, the major organ with which you operate in your career. And think about your brain like it's a computer, right? In a computer, you have hardware, right? The physical object, and then you have software, you have programming. And you buy a computer and it comes with default programming. Somebody's already keyed in this software into the hardware. And we all come with default programming from socialization, from our earlier experiences, from our families, from society's expectation. And many of us smart, accomplished women, we excelled in school. Like how many of us are straight A students, honor students, including myself, right? And in school, we learn that knowledge, keeping our head down, doing good work, right? Not speaking up until you raise your hand and then somebody gives you permission to speak up, that we've learned to associate that with safety because that was the first thing that we learned. Keeping our head down, doing good work, not speaking up until, given permission to, is what our brain associates with safety. And we've also learned that avoiding conflict is safe. And so many people, both women and men, associate difficult conversations, like say, for example, negotiation with conflict. I just coached a client and she was like, yeah, negotiation, I think it's loaded. There's going to be conflict and it's going to be difficult. And I'm like, is it? Or is it just a conversation? But we associate conflict with difficult conversation or negotiation, and then we want to avoid it. And also in our schooling, we've been taught, the harder you study, the more time you put into your study, the more you get out of it. And so from the school mentality, we've learned to associate the time, the amount of time that we put into work to equal value. And we hear this when so many smart people say, I worked so hard. I put in all these hours. I worked over the weekend. I stayed up late. And then it's so frustrating when higher ups don't acknowledge the value of that. And that's because time does not equal value. It's not true. The more time and effort you put into something does not necessarily mean that it creates more value. Value is the benefit. Value is the impact of the result you create. And sometimes you create results by thinking of something in an instant, and that solves a problem for like so many people and everyone's happy. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you spend all this time on it, right? So value, I want to clarify, benefit and impact of the result that you create, not necessarily time. But our brains don't know that because it's been programmed to think that more time, more schooling, more education, more hard work, safe, okay? And so what happens is that in this mindset, we also associate social rejection or hearing no with death. And there's a rational explanation for this. Our brains, literally, there's a part of our brain that has never fully evolved from when we lived in caves. And in the cave days, leaving that cave or getting kicked out of the cave society did mean death by a dinosaur, trampled by a monster, trampled by the avalanche of snow outside the cave, right? And so rejection really in our brain feels like a kind of death. And research has shown that our brains experience social rejection more painfully than physical injury, right? So it makes sense that we don't want to risk rejection. We don't want to risk no. So the reason why I go through this is not to be like, oh my God, we're doing it wrong, right? Oh my God, we're thinking from our school mentality. Oh, we're avoiding conflict. Oh, we're thinking about value wrong. Oh, we're avoiding rejection. That's bad. That's not the point of this. The point of this for us to really understand our default programming so that if you choose to, you can rewrite the software. If you choose to, you can have compassionate understanding for your reluctance to engage in difficult conversations, not with shame and judgment, but with compassion and understanding so that you can improve your results. Okay, so from here, I'm going to share with you the one dead simple shift that is going to be a game changer for how you engage in conversations moving forward, okay? Here it is. So when you come from, I don't know, you can see it. It's on the screen, right? Okay. If not, type it in the Q&A and I will read it out loud. But basically, this is how you know that you're in this default mindset. You think about a difficult conversation as if it's an interrogation, as if it is a referendum on your personhood, on the value of you. And you feel like you're going to be judged under a very harsh fluorescent light, very unflattering light too, right? Someone's going to grill you and they're going to like interrogate you. And of course, this feels intimidating and scary and like unpleasant. And so when we think about conversations in this frame of mind, of course we avoid it, right? Or we avoid having conversations about what we want, or things that needs to get addressed, but we avoid it out of discomfort. And instead of avoiding, a lot of people resort to accommodation or appeasing, just like, yeah, okay, whatever you want, whatever you say, boss, right? It's kind of like you freeze or you take flight. And sometimes what happens is the underlying issue, the key issue that we really wanted to get addressed, never gets fully resolved, and the anger builds, the resentment builds, and then eventually you blow up or you attack. You attack yourself, you blame yourself, you beat yourself up, you go home and you get mad at your husband or your kids, or you feel like so angry at that neighborhood dog and you want to kick it, you know, like basically it's what Brene Brown calls the chandelier effect, where the pain chandeliers down to somebody who doesn't have as much power as you. Or you go on attack. Oh, I misspelled it. I just noticed I misspelled attack. There's a C missing here. Okay. You attack your boss behind their back or your colleague behind their back. You go on like a gossip rampage, right? But it doesn't feel good. And so then you keep avoiding, accommodating, attacking. And then it's like this cycle that kind of repeats itself, where in the middle, the underlying issue never gets resolved. So frustration is growing, your career is not growing, and the problem never gets resolved. In contrast, here's how people who are really good at conversations, this is how people who are really good at leadership, negotiation, they think about difficult conversations. They think about it as a whiteboard strategy session where they see the other side, whether they're a colleague or manager, as a peer. And we're standing side by side together, looking at the same whiteboard together to arrive at a solution, at a mutually agreeable, beneficial solution. And so they're like brainstorming together, they're sharing their thoughts, right? So they engage with each other as a peer with mutual respect and collaboration. And they offer each other ideas, thoughts, things of value, right? Ideas, our thoughts have value. And they offer value to each other. And then this is like the, I guess, the beneficial circle, whereas this is sort of like the vicious circle, okay? So I want you to think about the conversation that you right now may be avoiding, or you may be thinking about. And I just want you to think about, okay, does that feel like this or this? And how, if it does feel like it's going to be oppositional or an interrogation, how can I pull my chair to the side instead of facing off? We can sit side by side so we can look at the same whiteboard together, right? It only takes one person to shift their perspective. Not both sides has to change for this to be possible. You just one person to shift their perspective, shift their chair to have this perspective for conversation to change from oppositional to collaboration. Okay. All right, so let us move forward. So what needs to happen? What are the key 6 actions that you want to be taking in this whiteboard strategy session, in a joint problem-solving conversation? Okay. Here it is, 6 key actions to take. First, you got to decide what you want. Yes, you have to decide before you go into that conversation. What do I want? What do I not want, and why? What am I willing to be flexible on? What am I not willing to be flexible on, right? In other words, what are my negotiables? What are my non-negotiables, and why, right? You gotta decide ahead of time. And you gotta commit to the process. Now, the reason I say that is because we wish that in a fantasy world, we wish to have this one conversation. We ask the boss for what we want, and the boss is like, you have my blessing. And voila, it's done. But it's never like that, right? I have a client right now. She has ambitions of becoming a COO, and she is engaged in a series of both formal and informal conversations both with the CEO of her company, with the HR people, with people in her network who have been through a similar process, or people who've been who have experience with what she wants to do, right? She committed to the whole process. It's not just a once and done conversation, it's a whole process. And it's a journey, right? But you got to commit to the journey from the beginning to the end, and not just think about it's just one conversation, right? And in the conversation, these are the steps that you want to take. You want to offer value. Remember, value is the benefit and the impact of the result that you're offering, right? And so you want to think strategically about, okay, what does the other side value? What's most important to them? And how can I frame for the benefit of, and the impact of what I'm asking for, so that it is in alignment with what the other side most values, right? How can we see this situation or the circumstance side by side together, right? And from there, yeah, of course, you're going to encounter some pushback, no, or questioning. And from there, it's not about just giving up. It's like, that is the invitation to go deeper beyond what people say into what do they really want? And how can we identify what both sides really want, right? So beyond what people say they want, like why do they want it? And try to find the connection between what you really want and what the other side really wants. And from there, you want to brainstorm for solutions that addresses what both sides really want. And at the same time, you want to be able to allow for discomfort. Yeah, making a decision, making commitment, uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for you. And also in the process, it may be uncomfortable for the other side. But this is the key thing. You have to be willing to allow for that discomfort, be willing to overcome the objections, even with discomfort, to get to an agreement. So these are the 6 key actions. And these are every step of these actions are what I coach my clients on. I coach my clients to become decisive in what they want, identifying the direction they want to take from a conscious perspective. Not just like deciding, oh, people tell me this is what I should want, so I'll just do it. No, what do you really want? What do you really not want? And let's be decisive about it, because decisive is the key skill, is the key quality that is going to carry you all the way through, and also help you show up as a leader. And I help my clients commit and build their commitment to the process by building their belief in the person that they are becoming, the leader that they will become as a result of seeing this process through. I help my clients articulate their value. And from a strategic standpoint, I help them see, okay, what does the other side really want? What does your employer really want? What does your potential employer really want? What does your client really want? What benefits them? So how can you tie what they really want to what you're asking for, so you have the best chance of getting heard and getting what you want? And from there, going even a layer deeper to what do they really want? What do they say they want? But how can we understand beyond the surface what addresses the real concerns of both sides? So this is like going even deeper. And I'm going to teach you a really dead simple framework for getting to this. And it's not hard, it's not complicated, and you can start using this strategy today to get results. And I'm going to teach you that today. And also, we brainstorm for solutions. Sometimes we do encounter roadblocks and difficulties and obstacles in our career growth, but it doesn't mean that we just like stop. It doesn't mean that we give up. That is the time for us to brainstorm for strategies, for possibility, for possible solutions, right? This really, I believe, is the key discipline of leadership, because the way I define leadership is the willingness to come up with solutions that are in the best interest of everyone. And also, this is a key thing that I teach my clients to do, allowing for discomfort. We have been trained by society to think that if you feel uncomfortable, if you feel frustrated, if you feel sad, if you feel angry, if you feel resentful, something has gone wrong, right? But what if it's not? What if it's not a sign that something has gone wrong? What if the discomfort of going through these steps is just an invitation to your greatness? So how do we allow for all emotions so that you can see yourself all the way through to each of these key actions? Okay, so why do these key actions work? Why? Because it embraces the human element. When you grow your career, you're going to grow your career by interacting with humans in a human way. And that means you gotta just engage with as many people as possible, as many humans as possible. And in fact, if you want to grow your career, you may want as many humans to know of what you have done and what you're capable of, right? And so you got to embrace that human element and the human decision-making process. And also, this works because you get better by experience. What that means is, you know, the capacity, the skill of engaging in these difficult conversations is like a muscle, right? And you build your muscle with a lot of repetitions, with a lot of practice, with a lot of experience. And it's the same thing with difficult conversations. At first, it's bad. It's awkward. You don't really know what you're saying, or you come up with the words, but it doesn't feel like natural and it doesn't feel totally comfortable. That's okay. And sometimes it's nerve-wracking because you have a human brain, and your human brain is offering up the worst of what if scenarios in your mind. Doesn't mean that it's going to happen. It's just your brain is trying to protect you. But it's okay if it is nerve-wracking, right? Even when it is nerve-wracking, if you show up authentically, right? Even if it's wobbly, it can be very compelling. It can be effective. And through a lot of experience, a lot of practice, doing it bad, doing it awkward, doing it nerve-wracking, then you get to overcome objections, right? I'm going to talk about this in more detail, but through experience, you learn how to overcome objections through collaboration, right? By working with, by looking at that whiteboard together side by side, not as if it's an oppositional, confrontational interrogation, right? And all of this you gain through experience. Like, you can watch this webinar over and over again. You can read all the books and articles, but unless you go out there, embrace the human element and get better by experience, you're not going to get to, this level of mastery. But the way you do that is, again, you make a decision about what you want, you implement that decision, and then you evaluate how did that decision-making process, how did that implementation go from a neutral perspective. And this is, again, is a key action that I do in my coaching. I help my clients decide what do they want to do, how do they want to show up to that conversation with the CEO or a major stakeholder. Sorry, I almost dropped my pen. And then I help them create a very specific custom strategy, sometimes with word-by-word scripts, right? Sometimes with like, this is exactly what you're going to say. This is how you're going to frame it. This is what you're going to ask for, right? And then they go out into the world, implement it, and then they come back, and then we evaluate what went well. How did you show up to that conversation? What are all the things that you did well first? Because remember, we have a habit of discounting ourselves. So instead of discounting ourselves, we're going to first celebrate ourselves, right? Give ourselves credit. And then from a neutral perspective, we evaluate, okay, what did not go as well as we liked? What can we do differently so that we can improve? The goal of this is progress, not perfection. Okay, so I am now gonna change my slides. All right, so bear with me for half a minute as I move on to the 8 phases in a career. The reason why, embracing the human element and getting better by experience is important is because there are 8 phases in everyone's career. Everyone, okay? I hope you can, all right, you can still see me and hear me and see the screen. Yes, okay. So in the beginning, you start your career and there's no recognition and there are no conversations about what you want, where you're going, how you can get there. And then you keep plugging away at your job, right? You're studious, you're hardworking, and then the recognition starts to come in. People start to send you praise and your boss starts to notice you, right? But still, no conversation. Probably because you haven't initiated it, right? And then over time, you wise up and then you start initiating these conversations because you're like, oh yeah, you gotta ask for what you want. Squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? So you start initiating, but you don't tell them what you want very specifically and concretely, so you don't get what you want. Right? Maybe there's like a mindset you're thinking, oh, I don't know, maybe it's still selfish. I don't want to step on any toes. So you don't tell them exactly what you want, so you don't get what you want. And then eventually over time, you wise up, oh yeah, no, I gotta just tell people what I want. Yeah. And then they say no. They're like, oh, that's nice, but no, you're not ready yet. You're not ready for a promotion yet. Or they say yes. They're like, yeah, of course. Yeah, we would love to see you grow into that, bigger role. But then nothing happens. There's no follow through. Okay. And that's because, you haven't follow through on the implementation all the way through. You didn't see it as a whole journey, right? You didn't commit all the way to the process of this ask. Or they say yes, and they start taking action to see your ask, to get that ask implemented, and then they stop. Okay. Or they say yes, and then your ask is implemented and you are promoted, or you're working on a flexible schedule as you wanted, or you switch teams as you asked for, right? And then you get what you want. You finally get there. But remember, like, you have to go through all these phases, and each time you failed, you had to go back and repeat and try again, go back and then try again, go back, and until you get to this level where, yes, finally you've gotten heard, you've gotten through, you've gotten buy-in, you've gotten promoted. Okay. And then over time, you've gotten so good at, doing the work, initiating the conversation, telling them exactly what you want, and telling as many people as possible, so that you have built a reputation. And so at that time, people start seeking you out for exactly what you want, because it is a no-brainer. You are a known entity. But notice that the first 6 phases of this are all basically no's, right? Doesn't mean that you did it wrong. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It doesn't mean that your career has stalled. It just means that you're going through the journey. Because you have to keep learning, you have to keep engaging, you have to keep trying over and over again to get to level 7 and level 8. And I just want to quickly review this process from the perspective of your employer or your boss, right? Because in your perspective, this can be pretty frustrating and aggravating all the way until you get it implemented, right? You get what you want. But from their perspective, they're like, we don't know who this person is. We don't know what she wants. Or, oh yeah, she's pretty good at her job, but I have no idea what she wants. Maybe she's not a flight risk. There's a book called How Women Rise. And in the book, talks about how men simply just ask for promotions more often, more assertively. And so managers just have the idea that, oh, if we don't promote this guy, he's not gonna stay. He's a flight risk, right? But if you don't ask, you don't tell them, you're a known entity for your value, but there's no conversation, so there's no big deal from the perspective of the employer. Okay, and then from the perspective of the employer, you have the conversation. They're like, oh, that's nice, but she didn't tell me exactly what she wanted. She didn't tell me how I can help her. So maybe there's no problem. But then you tell them, they're like, yeah, I don't really see the value of what she's offering. So I'm not really connected to her ask. So I'm gonna say no, I don't really understand. Or they say yes and nothing happens because there was no follow through, right? There was no, commitment all the way to the process, how it gets implemented after that yes. So they're like, yeah, I say yes, but like, you know, she didn't follow up, so maybe it's not a big deal. Or they say yes, they start, and then they kind of lose steam because they just got distracted by like all the other stuff. I mean, they themselves are trying to get promoted, right? And then like there are all these you know, last minute fires, and so they just lose steam, or they just forget. And then they say yes, and it's implemented all the way through when they're, you know, completely bought in on what you're asking for, the value of it, and they also see that both sides want to see this decision implemented all the way through, that there's commitment on both sides of the table. And then finally, they just know you. They just know that they know what you're good for. They know what you want. They know to like call out to you for this very specific topics. They know that you are the subject matter expert, etc. Okay, so notice if you can identify yourself in this process. And sometimes, you know, you may find yourself at level 4, and then level 6, and then level 7, and then back to level 2. Again, nothing has gone wrong. It's just a journey. And all 8 phases happen to everyone. All right, so what do you need? You need to know that no is just the beginning of the process. Remember, phases 1 through 6, all no's. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It can mean not now. It can mean that you talked to the wrong person. This sometimes happens, right? Or sometimes they don't understand the value of your ask. It wasn't really compelling to them. So you need just these 5 things. You need to have the courage and the willingness to do it messy. A lot of us smart women, we want to do it right from the get-go. We want to do it perfect. We want to get an A. We're kind of addicted to that dopamine hit of getting an A, but you need courage to, and be willing to just do it messy in the beginning. You need resilience to get back up each time you don't get what you want through the first 6 phases of that career, right? And you need commitment. And you stay committed by creating a clear and compelling vision for your growth. And by the way, I just want to say, when I say growth, I know that this is personal to everyone. Your vision of growth may be hitting it in the big leagues, right? Becoming SVP, becoming C-level executive one day, or you just want to have a balanced life. You want to be able to, you know, do your work, come home, be fully present, have a family. Maybe your growth is that personal growth of starting a family. But whatever it is, you get clear on it and then you stick to it because you're committed. You also need patience and the willingness to listen to the other side. Sometimes, I just saw this on LinkedIn, somebody posted that the problem is that we are too often listening to reply, not to understand. Remember, one of the key actions is to understand what both sides really want. So you need to be patient enough to hear them out, even when you don't like the feedback they give you, and consider the validity of what they're saying, and consider how can I understand what they really want? How can I understand, you know, the core message so that we can work together and collaborate? The most important thing is for you to feel responsible and in control of your career. 10 years ago, I worked as a hedge fund analyst, and I shared with you, I found out I was making 50% of the going market range. I was making $50,000 in a $100,000 job, and I felt miserable. I felt like my boss would never give me a chance to speak up. I felt like I was undervalued, frustrated, resentful, overworked. I mean, I felt like a total victim in the situation. And I felt like stuck. I felt like I couldn't leave. I couldn't do anything. And I was very, very miserable. And at this point, my life partner turned to me and he said, you know, you are in control of your career. And I was like, what? I am? And then I realized, holy, I am. I am in control. I can decide to leave. I can decide to do something different because my career is in my control. And when he said that, like this light bulb went off. I'm like, oh yeah, I get to decide. And so ultimately, I decided to leave the hedge fund and I shifted my career to working with tech startups, with entrepreneurs. I became operations director for tech companies in New York. But really, this was the pivotal moment. We're like, oh yeah, I am in control. And throughout the conversation, you got to remind yourself, yeah, I am in control. I am in control of myself, my decisions, my reactions, and I am responsible for my emotions. You are responsible for your emotions. And when you can get here, then you can also get to a place where you can feel neutral about no. You can feel like it doesn't affect you personally. It doesn't cut into your self-worth, so that you can respond to it with a rational mind, with an objective, with your higher thinking negotiation brain, right? And so how can you do that? I'm going to share with you a couple of really simple strategies today, okay? So that's a blank screen. There's one more. Nope. I have two more. All right. Here's one way to put yourself into the best frame of mind. I coach my clients on both the mindset and the strategy, because how we think creates how we feel and how we show up and the result that we create. How we think creates the result we have. And so Stony Brook University and Carnegie Mellon, there are women researchers who did this fascinating study, and they found that there are these two mental primes. And that's just a fancy word for like priming your mind, right? Reminding yourself. And they found that in this research, that when women did these two mental primes, that their mock negotiation outcomes were better than if they didn't. And they also compared it to men's, and they found that these mental primes improved women's outcomes, but not men. So it's very gender specific. So the first thing is, before you negotiate, before you advocate for yourself, before you engage in that conversation, remind yourself of the 3 times you did advocate for yourself, or 3 times you overcame no. I mean, I'll share one of my stories. When I was in high school, before I knew anything about negotiation or, the study, I asked 5 boys to go to the prom with me, and they all said no. And so I got 5 no's. I advocated for myself. I'm like, yeah, I'm worth it. I deserve to go to the prom with a boy. But I got turned down. And you know what? I ended up going to the prom by myself, stag, borrowed my sister's prom dress and her shoes. Didn't quite fit, but I could still dance in them. And you know what? I had the best of time. And maybe it's like a failure story, but still, like, I did advocate. I did speak up. I did ask for what I wanted. And then I gave myself what I wanted. I gave myself the prom, and I had the best time. I learned that even when you get no, that's not the end of the world. You can still show up. You can still give yourself what you want. You can still have a wonderful time, right? And when I think about that, like, even though I didn't get a date, like, I'm like, yeah, I feel braver. I feel like if I can get 5 no's and still show up to the prom, there's nothing that can stop me. I'm going to keep going, right? I'm going to keep engaging in those conversations, keep showing up for myself. And also, you can prepare as if for a best friend. So if you really struggle with your self-confidence, I can help you, but also you can use this mental prime. Before you engage in a negotiation, think about, who is my best friend? It looks kind of funny, but it's supposed to be a person. Who is a person that I trust? Who is a person that I know? Write their name down. And then ask this person, like, borrow their brain without literally asking them, but like, you channel, what would they say? What are the 3 best things about me that this person would say? Yeah. And if you're going to engage in a conversation at work, maybe you can ask, person who knows you and your work really well, or a mentor, what would this person say about 3 of my best qualities, best attributes? Yeah. And then consider they could be right. I know you're going to hear your own voice of doubt, but what if, like, these things, 3 things, hardworking, diligent, yeah, always thoughtful, always shows up to do the work. what if those truly are the ways that you add value? And then you ask yourself, okay, then how do these attributes benefit the other side, benefit my employer, benefit my client? And think about that and ask yourself and make yourself answer that question. How do they win? What is the result and the impact of that? Also, sometimes people ask me, I just don't know how to start the conversation. So how would you suggest your best friend start the conversation, right? Maybe you'd be like, it's not a big deal. You could just be like, hey boss, I'd like to have a chat with you about my career direction. I'd like to have a chat with you about where I'd like to go next year. Yeah? So when you think about, okay, what would I do? What advice might I give if I were, preparing as if for a best friend? That can help allay your anxiety and also identify solutions that your brain might not immediately see. Okay, so what if you hear no? What if they say no? What if, you get pushed back in the conversation? This is one of the best quotes from Lisa Gates, my mentor. She taught me a lot of things that I teach for women and negotiation. And she said, when you get stuck in the conversation, just form your mouth into a W. When you get stuck, just think of a W, your mouth becoming a W, kind of like a cat, yeah? And what she means by that is ask a W question. W questions are questions that start with how, what, who, when, where, and I put why in parentheses because I know this is kind of tricky, but stay with me here. You ask these questions to really get to the why, to better understand, the reason why people are saying what they're saying. If you can't read this is what people say they want and why they want what they want. So like the why is the mover of this iceberg, but you want to be cautious about asking why, because sometimes people get defensive. One recruiter told me when she gets asked why, she wants to eat. Okay, so you want to be kind of like strategic about that, yeah? You want to better understand their thinking, but you want to do it by asking using more neutral words. Okay, so let me give you a more specific example of this. So let's say, I'm going to give you a real life example. A client of mine wanted to have a conversation with her boss about moving to a different role within the same company. And she was concerned that if she had this conversation, this would anger the boss. And the boss would just say no, right? And so when you encounter pushback, so let's think about that, like hearing no. When you encounter pushback, most people get defensive, they argue, or they ask a yes or no question. They ask a leading question. This is something that lawyers do, right? They're known for asking leading questions. So take, for example, when you get a no from the boss is like, no, I don't want you to move to this other team. You might get defensive and like, but you don't understand. This is the best thing. Like, you argue, right? Defense is the first act of war, according to Byron Katie, my teacher. Or you might ask a yes or no question and say something like, are you trying to undermine me? Do you not believe in my value, right? You might be thinking it, but I want to suggest you don't want to do this, because remember, this is the way you get yourself stuck in an interrogation, or you start an interrogation. Right? So instead, get curious, not furious. Ask question all assumptions, even the assumptions that come up in your mind. Like, you want to ask, wait, does he not believe in me? Does he not see my value? Question that thought, and instead ask a neutral W question. Okay, so instead of asking, do you not believe in me? A better question might be, what are your thoughts about my career trajectory here? Right? Tell me, what are you thinking that I don't see? Notice how that's subtle, but it's more open. It's inviting the other side to share their thoughts with you, right? And you ask a W question, making sure it's neutrally voiced, right? Not like emotionally charged, like angry. And then you're going to get information. You're going to invite the other side to share information, and they're going to share information. They're going to share their thoughts with you. They might say, well, I was really hoping that you stick with me here in this team and help us meet the goals of this year, because without you, I can't do that, right? And so when you hear that, you better understand what the other side really wants. What they really want is they want to see their goals through. And so with that information, you can reframe the ask and re-ask. You can say, hey, I understand what you really want is to achieve our goals for the year. And I'm willing to work with you to identify new people, new personnel, or I'm willing to work with you to train my report so that she can come up to speed as soon as possible and she can hit the ground running and help us meet our goals, even when I'm not in this team, okay? All right, so that's one really simple strategy. Ask a double question neutrally instead of getting defensive, instead of arguing, instead of asking yes or no question. And from there, using that information to get to what they really want, reframing, re-asking, problem solving. All right, here's one more. What if the tension doesn't dissipate and people are like, so angry? So most people backtrack, get upset, or they shut down, right? Backtrack, accommodate, attack, avoid, right? But instead, you can just take a pause. Even if it's like for a minute, even if it's for half a minute, take a deep breath in. When tensions rise and you notice yourself wanting to backtrack, wanting to get upset, wanting to shut down, notice it and take control. You are in control of your response. And from there, instead of attacking them, you can empathize. Empathize simply means you verbalize what they are thinking. So in this situation that I just shared with you, if the boss is like upset, they're like, oh, how could you do this to me? You're stabbing me in the back. You're leaving me in a lurch, right? Instead, you could take a pause, breathe, stay in the conversation and empathize. And you can say, I see that you're upset. And you also clarify what you don't intend and do intend. Say, I don't intend to stab you in the back. I don't intend to make you look bad or to leave you in the lurch with this decision. My intention is to help you meet your goals. And my intention is to work with you to ensure a smooth transition because I know that's what's going to help you and me in the long run, right? And so in that way, you reestablish shared goals. Okay, so so far I've shared with you the 6 key steps, right? Deciding, committing, I gotta go back to my notes. Deciding, committing, framing for value, getting to what people really want, brainstorming, and allowing discomfort. And if you can implement these 2 simple strategies, you will change the outcome of your conversation. So I want to suggest maybe this would be a good time for you to think about, okay, what's one thing, one simple strategy, one action that I can implement moving forward and test this out. Don't just take my word for it, test it out. And if you enjoyed this webinar, if you found this to be of value, I invite you to book a free hour-long consult with me. If you want to learn more about working with me one-on-one, I work with my clients over a 6-month period, and I help them through each step of the 6 key actions. I help them strategize. I help them identify their own blind spots so that they can avoid them, right? Not fall into them. I help them create step-by-step custom plan. I help them implement it. I help them hold themselves accountable. I help them build self-confidence. I help them build their personal vision and stay committed to their growth so they see the journey all the way through. I just want to say, difficult conversations happen all of the time. Every day is an opportunity for you to show up with courage, commitment to your personal and professional growth. Every day we get a chance to grow our skill in advocating for ourselves, for speaking up, and for adding value in the workplace. And I invite you to book your free hour-long consult with me. You can email me direct at jamie@jamieleecoach.com, or you can go directly to the booking link, which is calendly.com/jamielee/consult. So if you have any questions at this time, let me check the Q&A box. What do you cover in the consultation? Excellent question. What do I cover? So here's what I cover. The consultation is like an intake, right? I am going to ask you questions about where you are in your career, in your life, and where do you want to go? Like, are you struggling with office politics? Are you struggling with self-confidence? Are you struggling with negotiation, with advocating for yourself, with promoting your accomplishments in a strategic and smart way? So it's not about like bragging, but really about communicating the value of your contributions. Or are you just like struggling to like feel confident in the workplace in general? Or do you not really know where you want to go? Like, so I want to understand where you are now, right? What you've tried, why it didn't work, what you think is the real problem, what you think you need help with, okay? And then I'm going to ask you, where do you want to go? Right? What would be a dream come true solution? What would be an amazing situation or amazing result that you create for yourself in the near future, okay? And then from there, I'm going to help you see, again, what are your blind spots? You know, sometimes it's a very simple shift that you have to see, oh, I'm just thinking about it wrong, or seeing it wrong, or I'm missing this thing, the small but critical thing that is going to change the result for me. And then I'm going to share with you what you can do step by step to build your confidence, to build your negotiation advocacy muscle, okay? And also we're going to build your personal vision. What is that vision for you that is compelling, that's going to help you generate and stay committed? And after that, if you feel that this strategy, the vision, if that works for you, if that is a slam dunk fit for you, then we talk about whether or not you and I work together. But if not, no problem. There is no risk. I have had people, book a consult with me, have a conversation, and they told me they identified blind spots that was really helpful, and they decided not to, commit to coaching. That's okay. And I have clients who, get on the consult, they identify their blind spots, they build a plan, they're like, hell yes, and then we talk about working together. And working together with me looks like a 6-month commitment. We meet over Zoom meeting. So you and I can see each other face to face, and we meet once a week. And every week, I help you, again, like, what is the mindset that is not supporting you in growing your leadership and your negotiation muscle? What is the mindset that is going to help you? And then once we identify that mindset, then we create very specific detailed strategy plan. I type up every week. I do like a whiteboard with my clients. I type up the notes, they can see it, and then I share it with them. And then they come back and they tell me how implementation went. And then we evaluate, we celebrate, and then I support them in continuing to grow that muscle. Okay, any other questions? So in the consultation, we can talk about, your career. We can talk about confidence. We can talk about office politics. We can talk about, where you want to go. We can talk about integration. How can you integrate your work with your life so that, you can have the balanced life that you do want without overcommitting, overworking, from a scarcity mindset, as if like you have to continue to prove yourself. Because this is like a recurring theme in many of my clients, because if you are on this call, chances are you are somebody who is really killing it, right? You're committed, you're ambitious, but you don't necessarily have to kill yourself. Yes, Andrea asked, how would you work with someone who is the CEO or owner of a business? Yes, I do work with CEOs. I do work with CEOs, and I use the same framework that I use for all of my clients to help them build the most empowering mindset so that they can manage their team better, they can manage their time better, they can manage their clients better. Yes, I do work with CEOs and I do work with owners. What else? Okay. I think I've answered. Do you work with individuals who are starting a new job soon? Absolutely. Yes, Tanisha. I do work with individuals who are starting a new job. I've actually, a few of my clients are people who started new in their jobs. And what we worked on with these clients is like, we had to unwind. I don't want to use the word trauma, but like things happened in their old jobs where, you know, it felt like a failure. It felt like they didn't do it right. And so this, you know, the past is sort of haunting them. It's like diminishing their self-confidence, and they want to show up to the new job with as much renewed, refreshed confidence as possible, right? And so I help them do that. I help them unwind their thinking, right? I help them process their emotions so that they can get to a place of calm, grounded confidence. And I'm really happy to share that many of my clients are having a lot of successes. I have one client who got let go during the pandemic. And then she was actually CEO of her company. She started as a contractor, and then she got hired at this new place. And I supported her in negotiating her equity compensation, her salary. And now she's making about double of what she used to make in the past. And she's working in an environment where she truly feels supported and respected. And it's a great fit for her, okay? So great question. Okay, Federica, does somebody feel the urge to cry during discussions too? How do you fight that? So there's nothing wrong with crying, okay? So that's an excellent question. It's like the question is like, what do we do with our emotions? And I want to offer, first of all, it's okay. It's okay if you did cry. It's okay if you feel like crying. And the only thing that is a problem is if you worry that other people will judge you for having shed tears. But I want to offer, you know, if it comes, it's okay. Like I genuinely feel like everything, all emotions are okay. But if you want to fight the urge, right, then you use the similar tools that I teach in my coaching practice, which is becoming aware of your own mindset, becoming aware of your own emotions so that you can regulate the emotions, so that you can be emotionally in control. And that takes practice. That takes time. But if you are having like the sudden urge to cry during a conversation, it probably is a sign that you've been repressing it. You've been like really pushing down that urge, and then it takes over, right? And so it takes practice. It takes a lot of conscious practice to get to a place where you get to a place where you can regulate that emotion. Okay. What frameworks do you use to help clients get clear on what they want, where they want to go in their career? Excellent question. So the framework that I use is I give them full permission to want what they want. You have full permission to go to this ideal scenario, paint it, dream it, and not judge it. Yeah. And I just did this session with a client who happens to be CEO. And, you know, we talked about what do you really want? What would be your fantasy scenario for your work-life balance. And then we detailed it, like wrote it down in like very specific detail. How many hours is she working? How many hours is she spending at home with the kids? Yeah. And we wrote it down at the end. She's like, oh, this is achievable. I'm like so close. I'm like 80% there. Yeah. So I don't have like a fancy trick. Amy, what if you can just allow yourself to want what you want? Like the reason why we feel like we can't get clear on what we want is I want to offer, again, the brain, the default programming, the socialization that, oh, I shouldn't want this, or I shouldn't do that. It should be like this. What if we drop that, right? And so I want to invite you, if you want to have a chat about it, there's no judgment, there's no risk here. I'd be happy to, give you the space to explore, what do I really want? Where do I really want to go? And just being like heard when you say it out loud, like being heard as you say it out loud can also kind of give you that sense of freedom, that sense of like allowance and acceptance for what you truly desire. Anonymous says, I tend to cry during any stressful high stakes conversations. It's particularly frustrating at work. I've never been able to stop it. So I just want to offer you compassion, okay? It sounds like, maybe there's something bottled up, yeah? Remember, the sixth key action is that you have to allow for discomfort. And allowing for discomfort itself is not necessarily comfortable, but when you allow yourself to fully experience the frustration, and the thing I want to offer here is when you feel frustrated, sometimes there's something underneath the frustration that we're not willing to be with. Sometimes it's sadness, sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's anger, right? And like just reading your comment, it sounds like you're like frustrated that you're crying, right? So you're making your emotion and your emotional reaction a problem. And so again, I want to offer, what if it's not? Right? It's okay, you're human. I know we work in male-dominated industries where men tend not to cry, and crying sometimes gets judged as a sign of weakness, but you know what? I don't see it as a sign of weakness. I see it as just a sign that you are a human. You're a human experiencing a human emotion, okay? So again, I want to offer, as I said earlier, if you find that this is happening over and over again, this probably is a chronic issue where you're not fully allowing yourself to be with the discomfort that you already have, even before you get to the high stakes conversation. So it's like it's a problem that needs a long-term solution outside the conversation, okay? But I want to offer, it is possible for you to have control and power over yourself, your emotional reaction. It's not a problem. You're okay. You're a human. And yeah, again, practice just allowing yourself to be okay with that frustration. I know it's like, I'm saying it sounds like, what is she talking about? How is this related? It's totally related, because even MIT researchers have said that our emotions are the most important factor in how we show up and how we engage in a conversation, right? And so when we don't feel emotionally in control, then we don't feel in control of the conversation. So yeah, I feel like I've been talking a lot about that. You're most welcome. So anyone else have a question? Otherwise, I will stick around if anyone else has a question about this, about the consult, about anything that I shared during today's webinar. I'll stick around for a few more minutes. Otherwise, again, I invite you to book your free consult. I think I'm almost fully booked for September, but I have availability in October. I'd be more than happy to address your questions individually, or if you want to work on any of these things, or if you want to work on any of the 6 steps that I shared with you, you want to have a one-on-one conversation. I don't bite. I'm pretty friendly. Yeah, and my intention is to really support women and help women become bolder, braver, and better paid. Do you work with clients who are currently struggling with their career advancement during the pandemic, corporate merit freezes, etc.? I work with all types of clients, and yes, I have, and I do work with clients who were impacted by the pandemic. I coached a client who were let go because of the pandemic. I coached a client who was furloughed because of the pandemic, and actually everyone has been impacted by the pandemic because we're all working from home, and so we have moms who are juggling the schoolwork, corporate merit freezes, etc. Yes, Diana, I have worked, and I do work with clients whose companies have been impacted by the pandemic, and they did a reorganization. They did a freeze on promotions. Yes, answer to that question is yes. The thing that I teach in my coaching practice is that, things happen, right? Pandemics happen. Corporate merit freezes happen. Demotions happen. Furlough happens. Layoffs happen. They do. Terrible bosses, difficult people, they happen, right? These really do happen. And so the question is, how can you see yourself in control no matter what? How can you be responsible and take action for you no matter what is happening outside in the circumstances, outside in the world, right? How can you take control? Because you always can. There's always something you can do. And that was truly the lesson that changed my career around 10 years ago when I was like feeling stuck, and my life partner said, you're in control. I'm like, oh yeah, I can just change careers. That may not be the answer for you, I don't know, but I want to offer, even when there are corporate merit freezes, things do happen at organizations. Projects do move forward, and people will be evaluated, right? And people who do add the most value, even during this time, they will be the ones who get rewarded when the freeze is unfreezed. You're most welcome, Kat. Yes, Amy, this is being recorded. Diana, you're most welcome. All right. So I look forward to speaking with you. Anyone else? Okay, Philippa asks, you're most welcome. I'm so glad you found it useful. Okay. You're welcome, Sarah. You're welcome, Amy. You're welcome, Catalin. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon. All right, bye.